Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever in the world you're joining us on cyberexchange.ca. Many times in my previous sessions, whether it's the Power Hour, whether it's some of the sessions that I recently did at Canadian Women in Cybersecurity or Beyond Borders, you've often seen me talk about the PPT approach to technology. Whenever we see a problem, for example, when I talk from a security perspective, let's say we're experiencing some sort of anomalous activity on our network. Often we tend to take the perspective that we can just throw money at technology. And I've often emphasized that that is not the right way to be going about things, which is where I bring in the concept of PPT: people, process, technology, and in that order specifically. You've got the technology, but you need the right people behind it. And you need processes in place to get that ecosystem working. Today, however, I'm going to add another P to that PPT perspective that I bring to the table. And that is the word perspective itself. Because technology, skills from an edtech perspective, AI, cybersecurity, do not operate in a vacuum. They operate in a context. And often we take certain elements in that context for granted. Today, I invite you all, in keeping in spirit with the Canadian Women in Cybersecurity theme, keeping in spirit with the idea of We Are Cyber, choose to challenge the International Women's Day theme, I invite you to join me as we look at one of our blind spots when it comes to access to technology. I've held this to myself that for this year, one of my challenges is to check my privilege. And in this Tech Talk DC today, I'll be checking my privilege from an abilities standpoint. And we'll be looking at very deeply the role of AI in engaging people of all abilities, not just in improving their quality of life, but also allowing individuals of different abilities to come to the table when it comes to AI developments and AI technologies. My name is Ali Hirji, and all of you know me as the host of the Power Hour, faculty at Durham College, and the lead of both the AI Hub and the Center for Cybersecurity Innovation. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Tech Talks DC. Before I begin, I want to give a shout out to the team at CyberX for giving us this environment for today, and a shout out to their team for the lovely production that you're seeing right now on the platform. Now, I've said this before. Often people laugh at me because I take a different approach to things. I tend to laugh back at them because they're all the same. And today is a different approach again, and I invite you on this learning journey. So without further ado, I'm going to invite my panelists to introduce themselves, and we'll dive deep into this topic of AI for all abilities. Firstly, Stuart, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what you do and why is this topic important to you? Stuart?
Fantastic. Thank you, Ali, and a pleasure to be here with the other panelists today to discuss this very important topic. So my name is Stuart McReynolds. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer at Ability Centre. We are a very unique charitable organisation based in Whitby, but with global reach. So we focus on improving quality of life through the lens of improving health and well-being, economic participation, and social inclusion for people of all ages and abilities. We operate out of a 125,000 square foot fully accessible inclusion incubator where we develop, research, test, and prove programs and services that we then deliver provincially, nationally, and even globally now. My background is very eclectic. I grew up in the UK, just outside of North London. I've had the fortune of living in Spain, New Zealand, and Canada. So I bring a bit of a global perspective to my work. And my whole career has been focused on accessibility and inclusion, and really just looking at how can we embrace accessibility through the lens of innovation, and how can we transform, the social environments and remove barriers so that everyone in our community can fully participate.
Thank you very much, Stuart. And I'll add to that besides that wonderful introduction, one of the focuses that you see at the Ability Center is not just on equal access, but equitable access as well. And we'll be talking a little bit about this, as I also know that one of my colleagues who has joined in has also sent me a question around what are some of the challenges around language that we need to be talking about. So equality and equity will both feature in this conversation as we study AI for all. Stuart, once again, thank you very much for your support. And I will also add this. It's truly admirable when a CEO of a large organization in our region responds to a tweet from somebody randomly. My students saw the Ability Center and said, hey, let's reach out. And we got a response. And I think that power of showing up is going to take us a very long way. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ian. Ian's another wonderful individual from the team at the Ability Center. I've got to engage with Ian over the last 2 weeks or so, and it's been wonderful and remarkable. Ian, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, and why is this subject important to you. Ian?
My name is Ian Piggot. I go by they, them pronouns for anybody watching. I'm the director of technology at the Ability Center. I came on board full-time with the center about just over a year ago now. But before that, I was actively involved with the center with actually Durham College. Durham College students actually volunteered and ran a lot of our IT processes for us, help build our network, help to get us where we are today. So it's a special relationship with Durham College that we have. My job at the center is, pushing us forward with our technology, making sure that technology serves everyone, not just, the able-bodied people in the room, but absolutely everyone. That's me.
Absolutely. And I really like the fact that, you've the shout out to Durham College, much appreciated. But the second part of this is I'm paying very close attention to the language that you're using as well. And to our audience, I will say this is my first session on this topic. If at any point of time I use a term out of context, I do beg your pardon. And I have told Ian, Stuart, and Medha as the experts in this space to correct me when needed. And if anybody has any questions over the types of language as well, please drop them in the chat and we'll be happy to address them. Again, we're learning as we go along. So if we make any mistakes, the fault is mine, and I do beg your pardon in advance. Ian, thank you so much. And I also agree with you, on this journey of making technology accessible to all, you're never going to eliminate risk. There are risks that you take, but you try and reduce it in different ways. You try and put safety mechanisms in place that allow people to engage with AI, different technologies in a safe space. And the Ability Center has done a fantastic job to enable that, and we'll be diving deeper into that. And lastly, but not the least, someone who's in no need of an introduction to the cyber exchange community, someone who's been a huge supporter and investor in Durham College and who continues to hire students from Durham College. I'm going to ask Medha to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her company, and tell us how, as a result of the pandemic, she's now realized new technologies that are giving access to service to people who previously didn't have access to services. Medha, a real quick introduction from you.
Thanks, Ali. Hi, my name is Medha Saraiya. I'm the CEO of ConnexHealth. At ConnexHealth, we do various different things. We started off as a platform that connects healthcare users with healthcare providers, mainly for home care services. But since then, as Ali mentioned, during the pandemic, we have diversified, and now with help of Durham College, we've developed a platform that does pharmacy delivery solutions in a very safe manner. We've also introduced COVID testing, both rapid and PCR, and our ABA therapy program, where we provide therapy to individuals in need with disabilities, but at the same time, parent education series, so we can support the parents and caregivers of those individuals.
Thank you, Medha. And one of the other things that I'd add to this as well is the pace at which some of this innovation has happened at ConnexHealth. Often, when I was engaging with Stuart and Ian, the conversation was around, well, when can we start doing projects? And let's go through this process slowly but surely. But the reality is that we need to start now. I remember this quote from Canadian Women in Cyber, where someone said, in about 2 years of innovation have been realized in about 2 months as a result of this pandemic. So we've had to move strategically, we've had to move quickly, and we've had to move in partnership. So we're going to be engaging more around this. But first, I want to set some more perspective and some more context. You've heard me say this many times before, is that if you're failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. And the first element that I want to talk about in this discussion today is, what do we mean when we talk about abilities? You'd have heard me use the term differently able. You'd have heard other folks talk about exceptional individuals. You might hear people use the term people who are on the spectrum. So I'm going to start with Stuart and then Ian to shed some perspective on, what do we mean when we're talking about different abilities, especially from the context of the Ability Center? Stuart, can we start off with you, please?
Yeah, excellent. And that's a great starting point, I think, Ali. And I think that's a conversation that we could spend a whole week on, is the language. And I think what's important to note for everyone joining us today is that if you speak to one person with disability, you've spoken to one person with disability. And in the disability community, people resonate to different language based on their own lived experience and based on how they identify. So in Canada, typically we use person first language, so a person with a disability. However, there is a big push in our disability community globally at the moment about using the word disabled and being proud of it and owning that identity. So I think that's incredibly important. That the easiest way to remember is ATP, ask the person. And I think that's really important when you're engaging in language for the first time, is work with the individuals and understand how they want to be referred to and what identity they use. What's unique is, and from an ability center perspective, we use the word abilities very strategically. And we use the word abilities because we serve everyone. And so we're not using abilities to describe people with disabilities. So they're certainly part of the equation, but we look at accessibility inclusion as everyone together. And so what's unique is that I think we've got a bit of an archaic view on disability. And so when we look at statistics, StatsCan data, and lots of other data, we know that 22% of the Canadian population in particular identify as having at least one disability. That's just over 6 million people. There's 1.3 billion people globally that identify as having a disability. But for me, that's just scratching the surface. How many of us have a disability that we don't disclose, that we don't self-identify? And I think now, especially the results of the pandemic and the impact on mental health, that really we don't have disabled and non-disabled. We're all on a spectrum of ability, and we can progress or digress accordingly on that spectrum. And I think that's what's so important about really looking at accessibility, innovation, and universal design. You're not just programming for one demographic of our society, you're programming for everyone. And that experience is not just going to provide equitable access for people with disabilities, it's going to enhance the user experience and customer experience for everyone. So when we talk about language, when we talk about differently abled, we're all differently abled. It's not just people with disabilities. I mean, I would love to get an MBA contract, but there's absolutely no way, because I simply don't have the potential ability to play at that level. So I think when we talk about differently abled, it's all of us. And then when we talk about people with disabilities or disabled, the language we use would depend on the individual group that we're working with and how they identify. And I think that's really, really important. And there's a saying in our disability community, nothing about us without us. And I think that's really important to engage in communication and language based on those principles as well.
Absolutely. And Stuart, thank you again for that very inclusive understanding of what we mean by abilities. But more importantly than that, a couple of weeks ago, I was on a session with Karen Nimani from WESIS, and she says, we've got to come out of this practice of calling things out. Instead, we need to call people in. And I think you've really embodied that with your definition there. I like the aspect of it being we're servicing and catering to everybody. Everybody has different types of abilities, and everybody can find a space and a room of their own within the Ability Center. And I also enjoyed the particular aspect where there are blind spots where people may not even know or recognize that they have certain needs that can be met through an organization like the Ability Center. So thank you, Stuart, for setting that context for us. Ian, I'm going to bring it to you because a question has actually come in. And given your role as a director of technology, can you shed some light on some of the programs that you run at the Ability Center and how these programs are geared to different abilities? Ian?
So sorry, could you repeat the question for me? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely, not a problem. So the question that's come in is, can you shed some light on some of the programs that you run at the Ability Center, and from a technology perspective, how are those programs impacted? Just a little bit of an overview of what happens at the center.
Okay, of course. So one of our, with the global pandemic that is currently going on, and when it happened in March, our trying to support our team in delivering our programs. So one of our programs is, we call it the Thrive program. It's respite for those who might be neurodiverse. Transferring that program onto a virtual platform and getting our team up and running on that virtual platform, it took a little while for us to pivot onto that, a few weeks, but I think our team did a really great job with that. But using that virtual technology and having our staff, our program leads, being able to deliver from their home, being able to connect with our participants. We hadn't thought about reaching out in that way before until the pandemic hit. So having that sort of change driver was huge for us. And the strides that we've taken with delivering virtual programming, with not only for Thrive, but also for our employment programs, just having it so that we can reach out to a much larger community now is a huge step forward for us. And honestly, I'm a little thankful that the change driver came along, and we're expanding now. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Ian, I appreciate that and the response. And thank you to the question to the individual that asked it. Just for our audience right now, while you're watching the session, you'd also see beneath, there's some nice information points that are running around down below with the Ability Center, as well as links that you can reference if you want to learn more about Ability Center's programming. So thank you for bringing those questions, and please keep them coming. I'm also going to take just another 2 minutes just to set a little bit of more context with Medha, and then we're going to jump into the AI element and the role of AI. So Ian, thank you for that. Medha, I'm going to jump over to you right now, because one of the things that as a result of the pandemic, and Ian brought it up rightfully so, is you've recognized that now the community, especially some of the vulnerable groups that you've been engaging with prior to the pandemic, now you had to provide them services virtually. Now you had to start training a lot of seniors, for example, with using different technology tools. Now you had to start training parents with understanding what their children might be going through when they're studying on Zoom for 8 hours in a day. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the training programs that you've put in place and some of the sessions that you're running with different groups to provide access to support when it comes to using technology and understanding different needs and abilities? Medha?
So just reflecting back on what Stuart said, one of the quotes that I'd read a long time ago was, disability is an ability that's not been identified. And that kind of resonated right now, because every time when we talk about disability, somebody who's got disability in one area is extremely able and extremely capable in something else. So we just need to help them identify. And that's something we had to do unfortunately, when the pandemic hit, was how do we get seniors who did not have the know-how on computer literacy and get them trained? So we did cybersecurity training for them. We did training on helping them just get a bit more education on how to navigate the devices and how to keep safe during these times. We've also done parent education series, as Ali mentioned, and that is to help parents figure out how to deal with the stresses is one of the bigger things, because now you have kids who used to be active, they had schedules, and now everything is broken and they are virtual and they are in front of a screen for 6 or 7 hours a day, not getting the physical activity, and they're frustrated because they cannot meet their friends. They don't have the social life anymore.
Yeah.
So how do we help them? So those are some of the more realistic areas that we had to pivot to. But more than anything else is, how do we do all that while keeping everyone safe? So the cybersecurity aspect of it and training them around that was another major area. Not only them, all our care providers, because they have access to people's private information.
Right.
How do we train them and make sure they are safe online?
Absolutely. And there's been a larger context around this. So as our audience is beginning to understand, is that now it's not only just a question of how do we use technology to support individuals who have different needs and different abilities and different perspectives, but also how do we do this from a pandemic perspective, given some of the challenges where everything is virtual, if not hyper virtual. So thank you, Stuart, Ian, and Medha, for setting some context for us with understanding what the Ability Center does, some of the programs, and I know there's more questions actually for you to talk about your programs at the Ability Center. One has come in from Dawn Terry from the town of Ajax, so shout out to Dawn. So we'll get into that. But Medha also brought this aspect of, there's certain realities now in introducing technology into these spaces, which we need to contend with. Now I want to dive a little bit deeper into the AI side of things. And Ian, if we can start with you and then go to Stuart and then Medha. You've heard me say this before, if you've heard sessions from me, is, there's no AI without IA. There's no artificial intelligence without information architecture. We need to have the right information, the right data in place in order to transact on anything which is driven by AI. Ian, can you shed a little bit of light on your perspective on AI and its potential in a space like the Ability Center? Ian?
Yeah. So right now, we're actually in the beginning stages of sort of revamping a lot of our systems behind the scenes, which would include, our membership database, our participant database, all of the data that lives around our members and around our participants to help serve them better, and running AI over top of that. And one of the I was attending a Microsoft conference about a year ago, and something that they showed with their AI product was being able in, a casino, being able to use emotional recognition on whether somebody was, winning, losing, having a good time. And I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if we could implement something like that at the Ability Center, and using our security cameras that we have placed around to stream into an emotional intelligence agent. And if somebody's having an emotional breakdown or is in need of assistance, the AI can alert the relevant staff members that, hey, this participant is, in distress, or maybe this person, we've had a fall in one of the hallways, and alert the relevant staff members. So that's a project that's on the horizon for us, and moving with that. So yeah, that's something that I would love AI in our space to be able to do. We're also looking at AI in perspective to donors, and being able to personalize our experience with our donors, and being able to just reach out to them more organically.
Absolutely. And Ian, I really like this perspective where you've looked at AI from a service delivery perspective, but also from how it impacts the individual experience within the center itself, but also for your members or your users outside of the space of the Ability Center. A question has also come in, and Ian, I'll come back to you after I go to Stuart and Medha, and then we'll come back to you. There are a couple of questions on specific use cases of AI, but Ian, Stuart, I want to bring you into this conversation. With AI, there is a bit of a buzzword feeling to it. And, I've said this before, like, in God we trust, everybody else must bring data, because data apparently, and well and truly, it is the fuel behind the rocket that is AI. But what kind of buy-in do you need from the community? Is the board, for example, at the Ability Center on board with, yes, let us consider the use of AI? Are there any concerns when it comes to, from a bias, from an ethics perspective, with deploying AI in a space like the Ability Center? Stuart, a question and your perspective to that, please.
That's a very loaded question there, Ali, and I think it's certainly a great subject for debate in our disability community, both locally at the centre, but also globally as well. And I think from an Ability Centre perspective and my perspective, we've identified that AI has tremendous potential if it is actually delivered and designed in the right way. And by the right way, I mean that it has to abide by the principles of co-design and co-production. And the majority of AI is built on normative models. And so when you think about disability and people with disabilities, they don't necessarily follow normative models. And so there is, inherent bias in, AI systems for individuals that don't follow those normative models. So I think what's absolutely key is that we have lived experience as part of the design and implementation of AI that can inform, the needs that it needs to meet, and ensure that the experience for everyone is equitable as well. And I think that's really important, that we don't just think about AI as about serving people. We have to think about how we set individuals with disabilities up for careers in AI that can inform future development. And I think that's a missed opportunity, because I think, for the most part in Canada and even globally, we look at accessibility as a compliance-based strategy, that we're going to meet the minimum requirements, whereas really we need to be looking at as economic development. We need to be looking at it as innovation. We need to be looking at this segment as our population, as consumers and potential employees that can really drive that innovation. So I would say absolutely, from an Ability Centre perspective, we like to play in the grey areas. We like to be on the tip of innovation. We've got a phenomenal facility that we can, have a safe space for piloting and testing out new tech before it gets implemented in the community. So we're fully supportive, but again, we're also holding ourselves accountable in terms of we're not making decisions for the people we serve, we're making decisions with the people we serve.
Absolutely. And I think, again, this question about not just for, but with the people and this collective element. I'm reading some of the questions that's coming in. And again, a shout out to the CyberX team for making this happen. Just a little note, we did see on our Twitter stream 1 or 2 individuals saying that, hey, we didn't get the link to register. So if you know somebody that's trying to join, just give them the link to cyberexchange.ca. Thank you all for your support. Stuart, actually 2 questions came in with regards to that is, are there any focus groups? Are there any working groups that you've created? And we'll come to that very shortly, because there's something that I want to pick and bring Medha's perspective into this. Medha, you and I have had these conversations a lot, that when it comes to innovation, nothing's set in stone, it's set in jello. It's constantly moving. And you've had to pivot as a result of the pandemic. But one of the things that, let's say if we take, for example, the pharmacy delivery product that you've developed, that also makes recommendations to the fleet when to be ready. When do you see most? I think you mentioned Thursdays and Mondays, you see a high push in the number of requests for medication, so on and so forth. AI has kind of helped you also with planning and helping you with managing your services better. But there've also been challenges. For example, you mentioned that it's very challenging to find the right talent to maintain your systems, to maintain your platform. Can you talk to us a little bit about what does it take, not just to build AI products, but to also sustain them? Medha?
Thanks, Ali. And I've mentioned this before, it's always people, process, and then technology. So if you don't have the right people and the right processes, your technology is basically useless. And that's where the challenge is. So we can build as much as we want, but if we don't have the key people to help us maintain it and update it, because this is a constantly evolving society. And let's take healthcare. In last year since the pandemic hit, we have made progress that we haven't made in last 30 years.
Yeah.
Like in healthcare, a year and a half ago, if you'd have asked a doctor to do a Zoom consult, they would have looked at you going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And now this is the new norm. So we have changed drastically within this industry, and that's why we need to constantly keep updating. And to do that, we need the right team, we need the right people, and we need the right processes, and you have to be agile. In today's world, that's the only thing. You have to pivot at the top of a hat. You got to keep changing with the time. And we don't know where we are headed 6 months from now. Hopefully all of us will be vaccinated and life will kind of come back to whatever the new norm is.
Yeah.
But we don't know where we are. And those are some of the challenges.
Absolutely. And I'll add to that as well as, so for example, for the audience that's listening to us, and we're going to dive into this, what happens when a company like Medha comes to Durham College or to the AI Hub is they'll put in X amount of dollars, we'll match it with, in most cases, with some provincial or funding dollars, and then students will work alongside myself and a principal investigator. Let's say we work for 2 months and we develop the prototype. The question then comes up is, once this prototype has been developed, it's now sitting in the hands of Medha to scale it. And this is where we end up facing a lot of challenges, whether it could be from a funding perspective, whether it could be from a talent perspective as well, because it's not just about technology. To understand AI, you've got to understand psychology. You have to understand sociology. It's a very multifaceted, interdisciplinary perspective. So Medha, thank you for bringing that up. And it's a great bridge to bring Ian back into the conversation. Now, Ian, one of the questions that came into me directly, direct message, was talking about some additional use cases of AI. For example, Microsoft has detailed pages on how they're using AI, for example, to help people with navigating a space.
Yep.
But Ian, is it as simple as here's a technology and now it's going to work for everybody? What do you need at the Ability Center to start scaling AI products rapidly? Can you shed some perspective, Ian?
To scale AI products rapidly at the AC would be, first and foremost, would be community buy-in. As you say, we build something for, let's say, one community. It's primarily serving one community,
yeah.
Whereas we need to look at it in a universal design. So, okay, we've built this program or AI model, and it's serving, let's say, the blind community. But how would someone who might be hard of hearing also benefit from this product, right? I try not to look at things in silos. It's really difficult, but it's going to the communities, showing them the technology, asking them, hey, what might we add on to this or build this out with to help better serve your community as well. And the big thing for us is always resources, right? To scale this out rapidly, it's always going to come down to the resources. Yeah. It's going to come down to the manpower. It's going to come down to the talent. It's going to come down to the dollars and cents. So yeah, that's where it sits, really.
And you know what, Ian, I appreciate, and this is why we get along so well, is you call it what it is. Call a spade, and that's exactly what this is. And for all of the funding bodies that are on this platform, I see right now there's some folks from OCI, for example. This is basically a call for, we need to rethink some of those funding opportunities as well. How can we get not-for-profits involved in that process? What else can we do to make these funds more accessible? Because that in and of itself can sometimes be a barrier. Another thing that I'll say, and Medha put this really well a couple of years ago when we were on a session, is that one of the problems that we have right now when it comes to AI is we tend to think of it as, AI is the solution to everything. So we bring AI solutions everywhere without quite knowing the problem. And this is where you ended up, thinking, all right, well, we've got this AI solution. How exactly is it going to work? So I'm going to dive into that. We've got another 30 minutes and we'll dive into that a little bit more. But Stuart, let's come back to you. And this is a question that's come in, but I want your perspective from a technology standpoint as well. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you are or are planning to run in terms of providing more access to technology, training with technology? What else are you doing to sort of create more opportunities of learning in tech within the Ability Center? Stuart?
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me look at this from an immediate, mid and long-term perspective. So immediately, per Ian's earlier comment, what we've been doing is we have transitioned the majority of our programs into an online learning environment. And so our immediate focus has been making sure that we work with those that we serve to ensure that they're comfortable and confident in still engaging with the organization. One of the aspects that we're really big on is research and evaluation. And so we're constantly seeking feedback from our participants. And actually, it's been really reassuring that the majority of individuals have indicated that they've really enjoyed the virtual experience. And that I think it was around 66% of the participants we surveyed are interested in doing a hybrid of both in-person and virtual down the road. So what that indicates to us, Ali, is now we can target markets and communities that we've never been able to serve. So being a member of Ability Center doesn't mean that you have to live in the physical vicinity of the Spatial Durham region. We can get to rural and remote communities. A number of our programs are being delivered in hospitals at the moment. And so again, there's a great opportunity for us to look at how we serve those communities that we've not been able to reach. And I think we'd be remiss to say we don't want to go back to the normal. We want a better world. We want to carry on this innovation moving forward as we come out of the back end of the pandemic. So the immediate focus was on making sure that we provided equitable access to those that we currently serve. Looking mid to long term, what we have embraced now, and Ian will probably laugh because I've had lots of conversations with them about how does tech now fit into our strategy, because very organically, we've found ourselves being drawn into this space, and we've really seen, the benefits, but also the quick wins that we can use in serving and meeting the needs of our disability community. So we're now looking at, how do we look at technology in terms of embedding in absolutely everything we do as an organization? So not as a project or a product, but how does it inform our HR hiring practices? How does it inform, our enterprise revenue streams, our CRM, and all of those pieces? But more importantly, how can we leverage tech to enhance the program experience? So we're working with groups in the UK at the moment on some new and emerging technology to support employment training with a sticker system, which is really exciting. We're looking at how can we support the integration of people with disabilities in focus groups for new product development. Great example, autonomous vehicles. So, there's a lot of focus on autonomous vehicles at the moment, but there's very little being done in terms of incorporating lived experience of disability. And that is going to be one of the largest consumer markets who have never had access to, autonomous vehicles or driving ability that can now actually be integrated. And so what we're looking at doing, Ali, is we're although we're a charity, we don't necessarily behave as one. We're moving beyond the charitable piece which is still important, but how can we position a true value of what accessibility can bring for the lens of AI? And considering, globally, people with disabilities have spending power of $8 trillion combined with family and friends. In Canada, it's about 55 billion. There is such a huge potential social return on investment and economic return on investment. So from an ability center perspective, we're looking at how can we work with public sector organizations, private sector organizations to position that value, which will then in turn support equitable experiences for those that we serve as well.
Very neatly put. And I think that emphasis on ROI is extremely important, because in my point earlier on, when I commented to Ian's very clear elocution there, was I mentioned that, this is a call out to some of the funding bodies. We're asking you to put in some money, but there is a return on investment if you have that ethos, which I like to call the return on imagination. You've got to imagine what's possible, and there's things that can happen in this space. Stuart, a lot of questions are continuously pouring in. I'm going to weave through them as best as I can, but I'm going to go back to Medha right now, because it was something that you mentioned, which I truly enjoyed, and I think Medha can shed some perspective on this. Medha, one of the challenges that you faced when running some of your services, or when beginning your services, the early days of Connects Match, was to build a good AI model that can recommend services, that can help you find the right prescription or whatever, find the right doctor, or whatever, or the right PSW, was that you needed data. You needed something to work with so that you could identify patterns. How did you build, with no data to work with, and you couldn't use synthetic data, you build community around your service. So the question that's come in is, how did you build use case? How did you get users onto your community? What did you have to do? Was it grassroots, knocking on doors and 6 feet apart, however you could manage that? How did you build community around your service?
Well, there are two ways, right? There is the community, as you said, with the grassroots, knocking on doors, reaching out to people, but also partnering. Partnering with Durham College really helped us. Partnering with other organizations, like right now we have partnerships with CyberX or with Community Living or some of the other organizations or Career Foundation. All of those partnerships have helped get the data that we needed to build the AI. And that has helped us to get to that next stage. And another thing that I want to say is not all data is relevant data.
Yep.
So having those right markers to see which data is needed and what is not needed and what we can use. Another thing that we found was challenging was, again, getting the data to be completely HIPAA compliant and making sure that we are getting data which is secure. And we are following all of those. So as Ali, in the past, we've talked about it, getting those pen drive tests done, having the Center of Cybersecurity involved in Connects Match. So all of those things have helped us get to where we are.
Absolutely. And there's one thing that I want to add to this is, Medha, these notes that you're bringing about, we had to build community, we had to draw attention to our services. It draws good and dangerous attention as well. Because Medha, as we had talked about 3 months ago, you had the security defenses for it, but the more you put your services out there, the more you started noticing activities from alternative IPs that you didn't imagine. The more you started seeing that organizations or individuals or groups spread across the world were trying to access your service so that they could get personal health information. There is a double-edged sword in this. The more you go out there, the more you share from a tech perspective, the more social engineering can happen, and the more people can realize what they could get access to if they got into your system. So it's a really big conversation. And again, for those of you who want to learn a little bit more about scaling a startup when it comes to healthcare and the security needs, not only do we have ConnexHealth, at the AI Hub, we've got Eye Care Home Health, which you can reach out to Rick Manessa. We've got Brantford Pediatrics. You can reach out to Dr. Asim. We've got Neurovision Therapy out in Whitby, and you can reach out to them at any point of time to talk to them about some of those security challenges that come up as you try to advance AI and gather more patient data. Thank you for that, Medha. Ian, this question is for you. And again, thank you to the audience. Keep them coming. It makes my job extremely easy. Ian, I've said this before, computers are pretty useless. They only give you answers. They don't really get you to question things. Yep. And the question, the note that's come in here is the audience member has said, we could use AI, like, personal AIs to engage in learning and education with individuals with different abilities and detect for any emotional changes, detect for any pattern changes with their learning. So the question that I want to derive from this excellent point is, Ian, at the Ability Center, do you have any environments where testing can happen, or we can run demos of different simulations. Let's say if we were to use a computer visioning tool to help somebody navigate a space. Do you have space at the Ability Center or computing power at the Ability Center where such testing and demoing can take place?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely have a robust network with robust server capacity now, and yeah, we're happy to bring people in. Let's start working together and partnering, and let's make a better world.
Absolutely. And this is, I'm really glad to see that from a computing perspective as well, you've got that capacity. And without getting into naming specifics, I think it's extremely important for those who want to get into AI deployments, especially in new environments. You need to understand computing architecture. You need to understand the hosting demand, so on and so forth. See, and we'll come back to you with a couple of more questions that have also come in. Stuart, let's bring you back into the conversation. I'll reword this question that's come in just a little bit. And this is about something to do with community appetite for AI innovations. I guess, and this is basically asking, if I read it verbatim, it's saying, are people ready for such kind of innovations when we haven't even got, and this is an assumption, we haven't even got some of our basic services on point. People are still struggling to access services. There's still more that needs to be done. From your perspective, is the community ready for AI innovations in this space?
That's a really good question, Ali. And I think, when we talk about community readiness, I think there's probably significant members of the community that don't realize how often and frequently we engage with AI. But to your point, I think it's a really good area to explore, because you are right in that we still can't afford basic accessibility to many members of our community. And really, innovation in accessibility is simple access. And so it's great that we've got these companies and tech companies that are building these robotic wheelchairs that can climb stairs. But how about we just build ramps? How about we just look at some simple innovations? How do we look at the existing architecture and infrastructure we have in place and make it more accessible? And I think that's a really good place to start, is that the real shift that we can do as a society is focusing on those basics. And I think what's really important to know, and we spoke about equitable access, and we spoke about language and terminology, and you look at the K-12 education system, for example, and we talk about special needs and special education. There's nothing special about those needs. It's just what an individual needs to be able to have equitable access. So I would frame this in two perspectives: that number one, that we have the capacity, the resources, the expertise, and certainly the need from our community to create better access to products and services and built environment using AI. And really, the innovation is coming from just the simple things in this space. But we also can't lose sight of future innovations and areas, and especially when you're looking at infrastructure support, autonomous vehicles. You think about the future workplace now. That why don't we do something different that we've never done and work with people with disabilities from the outset, rather than retroactively or retrofitting solutions to meet their needs. So I think we can focus right now on, ensuring access, because we've got the means to do that. That doesn't require too much innovation. But then actually moving forward post-pandemic, let's make sure that we actually include people with disabilities right from the outset in informing those design principles.
Absolutely. And I'll emphasize this for those who are listening. I know we've got quite a few members of the AI community that's listening as well, who design products. There's never no design. There's either good design or bad design. And we need to pay attention to the design that we incorporate into some of our products and prototypes. Now, we'll go a little bit deeper into some of the elements around use cases for AI, and hopefully crowdsource some projects that we can potentially take forward to our local municipalities. I know, Don Terry from Ajax, you are on, so we might be coming to you with some ideas. But hopefully we can close the last 10 minutes with crowdsourcing some ideas. So keep your thoughts coming in. Medha, another question that's come to you is sort of working with what Stuart said in terms of the ROI. One of the things that you've also realized that by utilizing AI technologies, by utilizing secure dev practices and creating new products and prototypes, it's also realized new jobs. And it's also realized, for example, at one end, you have drivers kind of operating like a fleet for you, but there are also other jobs that have come up as a result of AI technologies. Can you shed some light on some of the job opportunities that have emerged, and how are you making these opportunities more accessible? Medha?
So some of the places that we have, like obviously being a technology company, we do need developers all the time. And that's where Ali, your team has really helped us. As you know, some of your team members now work with us and work for us. So that has been great getting that new talent. But at the same time, there is other ways, like as you mentioned, our drivers. We are giving opportunities to a lot of drivers who are looking for something else to do. They might be at the tail end of their careers, or they might have retired and they just want to do something and get out every day and have a purpose. So getting them involved is one way of giving back. Another way of getting people involved is with our voiceover acting or voiceover therapy. We've had kids who have had disabilities do voiceover like background acting for a lot of commercials. We've had a blind kid who learned how to edit YouTube videos, and he's doing amazing with that.
Interesting.
So those are some of the ways we want to get everyone involved and get people accessible. Another area that we are working on and which we are hoping to launch soon is just basically getting community together, like having, especially our seniors. As you know, one of the biggest side effect of this pandemic is a lot of seniors are feeling lonely, and um, that whole thing is causing mental health issues, and there are a lot of other issues that are coming out from just sheer loneliness. So how do we get them accessible, and how do we create a community around them where people can help each other?
Absolutely. Thank you. And Medha, I'll add to that is that not only have you created community in terms of connecting people together, I think with the members of your board, for example, I think Carol Todd, the mother of Amanda Todd, is on your board as well. And I think this reality that an idea that started off in Durham region and Coburg now has shot off into places like BC, etc., with your partnerships with, for example, like clinics, is all basically testimony to the fact that by using these technologies, you found people of different abilities, and you've had different opportunities come up as well. So to our audience, as you're listening as well, there'll be details of ConnexHealth rolling down in the ticker. If you want to reach out to Medha, she's also on the Cyber Exchange platform. Now we've got about 14 minutes left, and I see about 6 questions. So I'm going to do my best to race through all of them, and then in the meanwhile, also try and crowdsource some ideas. Ian, this question is for you. And again, it takes a little bit of a technical kind of perspective. Ian, what are some of the challenges that you suspect or anticipate to find when you're trying to find data to train AI models? So for example, let's say, you decide to build an AI model like the one that was suggested in the chat, where the individual said we could use an AI model to detect if somebody is having a bad day or somebody is struggling with the material and look at voice annotations, etc. What are some of the challenges you think we might face with gathering such data, and what can we do to address this challenge? Loaded question, but Ian, you're the tech person for this.
Yeah. So I find a lot of the time when we're looking for data around and building these models is we feed it data from people that we assume are able-bodied, don't have the mental health issues, and it's just that normal data. I absolutely hate normal data. We need to start training our AIs and feeding our AI models with data from a diverse group. So persons with maybe physical disabilities or motor function issues, neurodiverse individuals, people on the spectrum, right? We need a full spectrum, holistic look at our data. And we need to start training our AI with that, not just the sort of default person. I absolutely hate default data. We need to start engaging with these communities to start building the tools. Again, not for them, but with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think these are such important points that Ian has brought up. So for those who are listening, I share and I borrow from the same book that Ian speaks from. And this is this idea that, look, these are not plug and play solutions. When it comes to AI, these models are trained on data. Let me take 30 seconds and explain to you. Let's say if I'm creating an application to determine whether or to predict how much you could qualify for a mortgage. In this real estate climate, I really don't want to create that app. But if I was to create that app, one of the things that I would tell you is the first 100 users of that app, everything would be programmatic. You have this much income, this much debt, this is what you can afford. That 101st person will then be based on, my prediction will be based on what the other 100 had chosen. What were their categories? What were their income levels? What kind of homes they were going after? And in that, if I miss out certain people, that 100 data set that I have of 100 people ultimately determines the use cases and the results for an infinite number of other users. The power of those 100 users that I'm basing my model on can impact, and in some cases, be a matter of life and death. I invite you to look at some of the studies that have happened for predicting criminality, for example, in the US. And what's resulted in incarceration is an AI model that's built on default dumb data. So you have to work with your organizations to say, how are we capturing data on our users? Do we have their consent? Do we have their support? And are we capturing it in Excel sheets? Do we have highly functional databases? What are we using? But we need to start at that starting point. I cannot tell you how many times we've had companies come to us and paint for us a picture of a perfect utopia where I'm, of course, the supreme leader. I joke, but they picture, this whole imagination of what they can do with AI, but then there's zero data. And that's a product from an AI perspective that is dead on arrival. Speaking of that, Stuart, one of the questions that's come in is, how are you getting the community, how are you getting folks at Durham College, Ontario Tech to realize the potential in folks, for example, who are on the spectrum? I remember reading a study, although I didn't delve deep into it because it's not my area of expertise, where the individual was mentioning that people with autism, for example, may have the ability to learn certain coding languages better and more effectively. Now, I don't have the source for that, but I've read certain things like this. What are you doing in the community to tell Durham College, to tell Ontario Tech and people around you what the potential is in the learning capacity in some of your members? Stuart?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think certainly events like today are providing us a platform, a non-traditional platform, to be able to start to articulate the opportunities that might exist. And so from an organization perspective, we are looking at non-traditional relationships, so certainly working with the region of Durham, the town of Whitby and other municipalities. And again, not just talking to the same folks who are doing a great and remarkable job in accessibility, but looking at, how can we influence economic development? How can we tie into council goals and objectives? How can we really use accessibility to, fully recover from the COVID-19 pandemic? When it comes down to, how can we leverage the value of our disability community? I think one of the things that we don't want to do is to make assumptions. Certainly, we understand that individuals on, who are on the autism spectrum, are often referred to as being great in tech, and many are. But we don't want to, paint everyone with the same brush. We want to make sure that we allow individuals to identify what their talents are and leverage them accordingly. And so I think what's really important is from an ability center perspective is that we continue to, try and really craft out that return on investment, why it's so important. We need to move beyond compliance, and we need to look at community transformation. And if we're going to really transform our communities, every single person needs to be involved in doing that. And we just have to do things differently. And that's why I say for us, accessibility is simply innovation. When it comes to hiring practices, a lot of individuals that we work with, and we do a lot of work on pre-employment training, that they struggle with the traditional interview format. So, is the traditional interview format where you're sitting across from a panel, does that really assess an individual's ability to do the job? Why don't we assess the strengths and the skills of that individual and match them to the requirements of that job? And then, once you've looked at that innovation, well, you could apply that to anyone that's applying for the job. So again, I think it's really trying to position the return on investment. Number one, putting the call out there that Ability Center is an inclusion incubator. We are a living lab. Let's work together to, test these new products and solutions and then scale them when they're ready. But, let's not look at disability or accessibility as a project. Let's look how it can inform everything that we do as an organization, as a municipality, as a region, and as a country.
Fantastic, Stuart. And with that, I am going to take the privilege of my MC status for this panel and bring another question to you and ask you to respond to it in a minute. It comes from our very own Don Terry, and I see so many comments coming in. Thank you all for that. Stuart, I'll direct this question at you. We'll go to Ian and then Medha and come to closing remarks. Stuart, and this is a question on it recognizes Ability Center as a flagship organization. It's something that's holding the emblem in the Durham region. The question from Don is from the perspective of adaptive sports. Do you see that from an AI perspective, the space of adaptive sports could see an impact, and how can we be leaders in that space? Stuart, I'll give you the floor for a minute.
Yeah, fantastic. And Don is certainly a huge community advocate and has got certainly a great deal of experience through seeing what we did through the Durham Parasport Games. So as we look to AI in sport, I think there's a number of different options about how we can leverage it. I think we're seeing the rise in esports. We're seeing organizations like Microsoft that are really embracing accessibility. And I think esports and online sports are providing opportunities for people with disabilities to be able to connect with their peers and communities as they've never done before. When it comes to contemporary sport, I think there's a range of opportunities that we can use AI in. And at Ability Centre, we prescribe to the notion of variations. And we've just launched Mixed Ability Sport Canada. And what Mixed Ability Sport does is it provides different variations within contemporary sport. So we've worked with rugby at the moment, and a big shout out to Rugby Ontario and the Oshawa Vikings. We've created variations of that sport where individuals with disabilities can turn up to a club, be a member of that club, and play in a game, albeit with variations. Now, those variations are providing opportunities for individuals to play that sport that have never existed before. But that same variation can support a 25-year-old who's a construction labourer that wants to be part of the rugby club but can't take full contact in case they lose their money if they're off work, if they get injured. It accommodates that 60-year-old with a double hip replacement who wants to get back active again. So how do we look at AI in that? How do we look at training opportunities? So one of the aspects that's part of that philosophy is that we've got coaches in the mixed ability model that are individuals with disabilities. So how can we use AI and tech to support them in their facilitation, in their instruction as well? So, the opportunities are phenomenal, but I'll go back to that key point. We have to embrace the concept of co-design and production if we're going to realize anything near to the potential of what is on the table.
Fantastic. And Stuart, I think this element of design and bringing people to the table from a design perspective at the very onset is going to be extremely important to us. Also, I'd add to that is holding some of our vendors and partners accountable for the types of products coming out, asking questions, creating standards as well from a design perspective are all opportunities that we need to be thinking of when it comes to AI. For those of you who are listening, I say this all the time, that when I develop AI prototypes, 10% of my time is probably with the technical geniuses like Ian. 90% of my time is with the subject matter experts, the teachers, the trainers, the people actually playing the games, so on and so forth. AI is a very interdisciplinary subject. We have about 3 more minutes, and Medha, we're going to start with you. We'll have the final question for Ian, and then we shall conclude. Medha, this question is for you and this was a really good point brought up by another individual on the platform, where the individual says, hey, one of the beauties of AI and some of these new mechanisms we can run with AI is that now we can also provide services more discreetly. We can tend to our patients, we can tend to those who we're giving care to, and those who need some assistance in a much more individualized and in a private kind of manner. Can you talk to me a little bit about how your tool, for example, has helped parents, for example, now have some difficult conversations with regards to, for example, their children's learning behavior? Medha?
So AI is a great tool to help because a lot of us face similar situations. A lot of parents are now in a similar boat where they need to learn different tools or different techniques to, one, get their kids involved and keep them, just train them. And that's where teaching this mechanism to the AI, and I'm sorry if I'm not using the technical terms because I'm not a technical person,
That's fine.
but teaching the AI what we need to teach it will help. Another thing is also keeping it updated. Like what we used a year ago is not relevant maybe today. So keeping your data updated, changing it and tweaking it every so often as you keep gathering more data. Aldi, one of the things that you gave an example of with the mortgage, like 100 data set is giving you infinite number of results.
Yeah.
Maybe going back and tweaking that 100 data set because now you have 1,000 data points.
Yeah.
So updating all that is where the difference is made.
Absolutely. And one of the skills that, and I hope to work closely with the Ability Center, besides, one of the crowdsourced ideas is around sports, the other around learning from a coding perspective. also creating test beds, which is a third idea that was brought forward. But the fourth thing is understanding data and data analysis. And I've said this before, even silence is a data point. How is silence coded? How do you read through databases? What can you do with Excel? What do those formulas mean, etc.? All are examples of different workshops. And to Stuart and Ian, I will say this is we have our friends from Contact North that are on as well. They provide free access to learning in remote and rural communities. We should probably have a conversation with them as well. I see Trish Trenter is on, have a conversation with them about what could we do from an access to more learning and more expertise. Ian, the last question goes to you, and then we shall conclude. Ian, although we are staying specific to an AI conversation here, twice now in the chat, people have asked around privacy and security. Can you tell us a little bit about what are some of your top concerns when it comes to privacy and security, especially within the Ability Center? And as you start to gather more data and use more technology, what's top of mind for you from a privacy and security perspective? Ian?
So yeah, always top of mind, especially around our participants. So segmenting, who can actually access our data. We have particular staff that work in particular roles that they can only access their participants' data. We have staff that transfer between departments that work, across many departments that will, see more data. And then we also have our research team who has, sort of helped me to get more sophisticated data and also depersonalizing some of the data that we use so that when, it comes into research, they might not know who the participant is, but they know the impact that we've had on the participant and the participant journey. So I'd really like to shout out to my research team here because they have held me more accountable for data privacy and bringing that even more top of mind around that. As we build out more and more data, it becomes more and more sophisticated, and more touch points equals more security risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think the aspect of risk, constantly trying to lower that risk and getting out of this illusion that we're going to eliminate it. With that, I'm going to take a moment to thank Medha, Ian, and Stuart for their time today. My friends, I'm going to ask you to stay on this session so that while I conclude, we can take maybe a minute or so and just debrief in the green room ourselves. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We've learned so much from this session. And I will add this is that not only did we look at new opportunities for AI when it comes to adaptive sports, when it comes to test beds for AI technologies and differently abled individuals, we also got a good sense of what are some of the skills we need to be training for, and what are some of the partnerships we need to create to provide access to such training. But we also got a sense of this isn't just about when it comes to abilities, we're not just talking about physicality, we're talking about the mental space, we're talking about the virtual space as well. And I think it was so important that that statement that you made, Stuart, echoed by Ian and then by Medha, is that the Ability Center services all abilities, which include people who may not even know that they have certain challenges that they want to work on. And the Ability Center gives you access to services that you require. To our audience, I'm going to recommend to you that if you'd like to discuss a project, the purpose of this was to start a conversation. And I hope and plan to have many more of these conversations. But if you've got an idea for a project and you want to come forward with it, tweet at us at the AI Hub. Send us a message on cyberexchange.ca and we'll talk to you. If there's a company out there that wants to try out a prototype and wants to put in some funding towards that, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do. Medha, for example, is a great example of someone who put in a little bit of funding and now has a product that allows her to deliver medications to at-risk individuals, or any individual for that matter. If you've got an idea and you want to bring it forward, come and talk to us. We'll be happy to work closely with Ian and Stuart to look at some test beds for this. And lastly, if you just want to have a conversation, maybe have a workshop for your team on what do we mean by abilities, reach out to Stuart and Ian and make it as open to the community as you possibly can. I want to thank our audience for joining us today. And I want to close with a statement that I think, will sort of summarize what we learned today. One of the things that, I really paid attention to is how the Ability Center has moved forward. And, I've said this before that if you want to move fast, you go alone. You want to go far, you go together. Well, if you want to go fast and you want to go far, you bring your crew. And I think the crew like the Ability Center and folks like ConnexHealth will all help us go far and fast and respond to the needs within our community and keep not just Durham region as a leader, but Canada as a leader when it comes to access, abilities, and AI. Thank you all for your time today. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next month at another Tech Talks DC. This is Ali Hirji signing out. Take care.